Welcome back, it's me, Lou. I'm here for another action figure unboxing and review, and today we are featuring Batgirl. This is a part of the DC Multiverse line of action figures produced by McFarlane Toys. This represents Batgirl as she appears in the upcoming Gotham Knights video game. So the video game, I think it's been delayed, or maybe it's just coming out late. It's kind of surprising that we got the figures now, and I'm guessing the reason why we've gotten the figures the last few months is it's possible the game was supposedly, I guess maybe supposed to come out a couple of months back, but as like with most video games in development during the COVID era, due to lockdown and other circumstances, a lot of video games have been delayed, and productions have been kind of pushed back or whatnot. But, if you're an action figure collector, at least you get the action figures early. So, here it is. Here's Batgirl from the upcoming video game. It looks great. Immediately when I look at this figure, it kind of looks like it's a little bit based off of the more recent iterations of Batgirl. I think more specifically from the Rebirth era. Every time I look at this Batgirl, I think the color scheme kind of reminds me of the Batgirl of Burnside. And the Batgirl of Burnside, she kind of has predominantly the purple costume with the yellow accents, much like this one. So yeah, let's get started. It's a great looking figure. Comes with a baton here, a trading card in the back, display stand as you can see. On the back, some really cool fig photography. I like the angle of this one. It's kind of cool that they're kind of doing like an overhead shot. And she's standing on top of the building on the rooftop. If you look carefully, there's some graffiti. It says ha ha ha, kind of indicating the Joker. You have the gargoyle head. And this is, I don't know, really cool. It took me a long time to warm up to the figure photography because for a long time I was just really, really in love with the fact that they had used comic book artwork. And for me, I thought that was great because it kind of like, not all toy collectors are comic book readers, so I thought it was kind of cool that in some ways when they gave you the comic book cover, you're kind of also like educating the strictly toy collector about like this is the version of the character and more specifically which comic book they were from. But the fig photography, they've been winning me over. I think the photography gets better every time, so it looks cool. And some of the other figures that are out in this wave, there's the Flash, Superman, Batman, Harley Quinn, and Reverse Flash. And I'd tell you more specifically which ones these are, but my eyes are pretty bad and the print is like super tiny. But let's try this again. So we have Justice League Flash from the movie, I believe. We have Rebirth Superman, Three Jokers Batman, Birds of Prey Harley Quinn, and this Rebirth Reverse Flash. Okay. All right, let's check this out. It's been kind of cool that we got a couple of Batgirl figures so close to each other. Like, it wasn't that long ago. It seems like just like maybe a few months back that I was reviewing the Three Jokers Batgirl. And if you haven't seen that video, check that out. That video is kind of cool because I did a side-by-side comparison with the first release of Batgirl. And it'll give you an idea of like, how they stack up against each other. Okay, so first impressions of this figure as it's still in the tray, just all this dust that comes off the box. She looks fantastic. The hair sculpting looks all right. I have to look a little bit closer, but overall it looks pretty cool. You might notice there's some hesitancy in my voice because as I'm looking at it, sometimes parts of the figure look a little bit sloppy in terms of the sculpting. And in other places it looks really well done, but I'll know better once I get this figure out of the box. It comes with this baton. There was a video a few weeks back that Warner Brothers Games put out. It featured the new video game coming out, but it was like gameplay featuring I think Red Hood and Nightwing, and the game looks pretty cool. It looks more like a brawler than anything else, but it just looks really awesome. I didn't see any gameplay yet with Batgirl, so I don't know how accurate this costume is. I'm guessing it's pretty accurate because chances are Warner Brother Games probably gave McFarlane Toys, like, you know, the assets, or at least maybe like character design work, so they could base the toy off of that, so it's a little bit more accurate. It's a great looking figure so far. Alright, so let's take a look at Batgirl from the upcoming video game. Real quick, here's the baton. It's not the best looking weapon in the world. It's kind of weird too, because it almost looks like a gun. I think this is a baton, because the handle looks, it almost looks like a really weird looking pistol, just because of the handle. And as you can see, it's a little bit warped. It's not the greatest looking thing, but it's alright. Now for Batgirl herself, I'm kind of torn on the sculpting with the hair. Not that it looks sloppy, but it doesn't look as polished as some of the sculpts that we've gotten in the past. Like, it's kind of messy because you can see all the seam lines and the mold lines right there. You know, kind of breaks up the hair a little, and it just looks kind of weird. You see there's a mold line running at the bottom, mold line running across. Now that could just be on the production end of it. And I didn't notice this until now, but she's doing that crazy side eye that a lot of fans aren't too happy about. Like, so for example, you know, some of the older figures, if you look at the character head on, the eyes are looking straight at you. But for whatever reason, the past year, almost like every figure, their eyes are kind of like looking out towards the side. I don't know whose decision that was, but it's kind of stupid. I think a lot of people would prefer just to have the eyes be very neutral and look straight. I have to admit though, you put the figure under the right light and shadows, it looks crazy awesome. Like, I kind of wish she had a slightly different expression, because she looks just dead on too serious. But it's pretty cool though. It's a really nice figure overall. Now, I had some issues looking at the figure while it was in the box. It seems like some of the sculpting, I'm sure the sculpting is great. It could just be a case of like the molding or the casting process, but some of the texture here looks a little bit like, it doesn't look as clean and as sharp as, like, for example, like here on the arms, the texturing is really, really clean. It's really, really sharp. It's really like high definition, well defined. But in some other areas, it's looking a little bit soft and mushy. Now that's just me being, you know, nitpicky, but you know, I think McFarlane, they've raised the bar so high with their action figures that it kind of feels a little bit weird when you get a figure that kind of falls just a teeny bit off the mark. Now, I do like the color scheme of this costume, but it doesn't feel as flashy as some of the other ones. And again, I'm not sure if it's a case of the production process, but the belt looks horrible. It almost looks like it doesn't look very clean. The sculpting looks kind of messy around the abs and on the chest. It kind of looks like, for example, if you're familiar with, like, you know, if you customize action figures, or if you look at a lot of customs, you know, a lot of times customizers, they'll like sculpt their own details using like either Sculpey or like green stuff or like epoxy. And you always get this kind of like almost like clay looking texture, and it looks like stuff was kind of like carved. And that's the case here. Like the ab muscles on the body armor look very like carved alike, not necessarily like 3D rendered and on a computer. Likewise with the belt buckle, this looks really, really sloppy and messy. And then the paint application looks very amateurish. It looks like something that I would do. But on the opposite end, you know, parts of this are like hyper detailed. Like the leg here looks crazy awesome. But then as you work your way up, it's like this whole area looks very, very amateurish. You know, the texture isn't as refined. The lines aren't as clean and as sharp as the rest of the figure. So in some ways, it's a little bit disappointing. Now, again, I might sound very, very nitpicky, but when you've been reviewing McFarlane figures and, if they're hitting home runs all the time, you're going to notice when something's off the mark. And that's the case here. Not that I want to sound like I'm coming off negative, but, I'm just trying to be a little bit honest. But, it's a fantastic looking figure. I mean, if you just look at it, it looks beautiful. The hair does feel a little bit chunky, though. I think they could have done a little bit more work with it. And it's not very clean. I'm seeing all these seams and mold lines. It doesn't look as awesome as it should. So let's look at her up close. Here's a front view of Batgirl from the upcoming game. Side view. Here's her back. So she has a completely yellow cape. And underneath the cape. And then here's what I'm talking about. Like some of the sculpting here, it's really crisp, but then over here it looks very soft. And it looks like, as you get closer to the top, it's a little bit sharper, but then when you get towards the bottom, it's a little bit muddy looking. And then the belt here, I think the belt, it just looks it doesn't look very clean. She doesn't have much of a butt either. So, nice detailing though overall. Articulation-wise, her head rotates left and right. Does she look down? Just a little bit. Does she look up? Not a whole lot. Her arms rotate. And then as you rotate up, you're going to notice that you're going to hit the shoulder up there. So the range of motion is going to be hindered a little bit by that. Arms do go out. Bicep cut, which is cleverly hidden underneath the sleeve up here. Double pinned elbows. Unfortunately, they're exposed. It's not pinless. Wrist articulation, and I'm glad that they kind of got rid of that ugly ball joint that plagues so many of the McFarlane figures. The ball joint's hidden underneath the wrist guard. One thing I'm not too keen on this, now it's not no fault of the action figure, it's more so this design choice on the video game designers. I'm not too keen on the fact that the fins on her arm are just tiny. I'm so used to like Batman and Batgirl having these giant fins underneath her arms. But this one's kind of like, the fins are kind of more so relegated around her wrist area, and they're not too long. So it's just very subtle. Great texture and patterning on her leg. Nice wrinkles and fold lines. Double pinned knees, so her legs kick up. There isn't any... there's a little bit of swivel at the upper thigh. Double pinned knees. Ankle articulation. And we've seen this before with some of the other figures. But so she has articulated toes, but as you can see right there, the joint has a black pin in there. It's kind of like an eyesore. It would have been nice if they gave us a yellow pin, to completely cover it up, but it just looks weird. And if you stare at it long enough, it almost looks like a salamander or like an axolotl. That fish. Overall, it's decent. I don't think it's my favorite of the McFarlane Batgirl figures that we've gotten so far. Let's try to get her weapon in hand. It's weird. She has a trigger finger. I don't think Batgirl necessarily handles guns, but if you do have like one of the grappling guns, I'm sure you could like make use of that with this figure. And she doesn't hold the baton all that well. Because if you look here, like I pointed out, the handle is kind of like thick and very rectangle-like. And then the hand is clearly made to hold something a little bit more round. So when you try to insert this baton in there, it's not going to fit comfortably. And it's going to be at an angle. And she could wield the baton if you hold it at, like this, I guess. But that's not my favorite accessory. Overall, it's a solid figure, but as I've mentioned, it's not my favorite of the McFarlane Batgirl figures. I believe this might be the third Batgirl figure we've received so far. Previously, a few months back, we got 3 Jokers. And let me get the first release. I do have the first release figure on hand. So this was the first McFarlane Batgirl figure that we got. This was from Art of the Crime. And I think, yeah, I can get this, actually open up this box. Let's take this out. And like I said, this is what I liked about the older stuff. I liked how they gave you the comic book artwork, and then they give you a brief description of the artist and the comic book. I think it's always fun when they can like educate the toy collector about the origins of, you know, the costume design. Because like I said, not everyone who collects toys reads comic books. And then here's the height comparison. This figure is a little bit smaller. Like I said in the previous video, I think the Art of the Crime Batgirl is a little bit bigger than some of the other figures. And I don't know. I think it all comes down to personal preference. Like if you're a bigger fan of like Rebirth Batgirl, this might be more your speed just because of the color choice. Rebirth Batgirl is more so purple and yellow. Art of the Crime is kind of more so traditional Batman gray with yellow highlights. And 3 Jokers Batgirl is, I think, predominantly all black, you know, with yellow highlights. So it's cool that they give us options. You know, there's different representations of Batgirl. So, you know, just name your poison and chances are it's there. But like I said, man, that belt looks horrible. I mean, the sculpting on it, this whole upper torso area, the sculpting isn't very clean. It looks like it was done by a customizer. It doesn't look as nice and as professional as this. But it's not a bad figure, you know, don't get me wrong. And at the price point too, I think the price point's decent. Like I was just on Amazon just now because I forgot how much I paid for this. I found this at Target, but I went on Amazon just to get an idea. I think the retail on Amazon is $19.99 for this figure, which I think is great because, you know, we're seeing like price hikes across the board. Like Marvel Legends are going for like $25 now, which I think is a little bit too much. Same with like Star Wars Black Series. You know, I miss the days when you could pay $19 for an action figure, which is ridiculous to say because, you know, I grew up throughout the 80s and 90s where, you know, it wasn't uncommon back in the day like to buy an action figure for like, I don't know, maybe like $7, and you get like a 6-inch action figure with all these accessories. But, you know, as time goes on, stuff's going to cost a little bit more, so. Alright, so let's wrap this video up. Once again, my name is Lou. Oh, real quick, on a scale of 1 to 10, how do I rate this? To be fair, maybe a 7, low 7. You know, at the highest, maybe 7.5. But that's just being generous. If you're a fan of Batgirl or Burnside, this is the closest you'll get to her right now. The video game isn't out yet, but I'm sure once the video game comes out, you know, you might fall in love with this design. So it's like I said, it all comes down to personal preference on which costume you prefer. You know, if you like the gray costume, Art of the Crime. If you like the black costume, 3 Jokers. Or if you just want to change it up, you know, this is a great alternative. So yeah, it's a nice figure overall. You know, don't get me wrong, I do have little minor issues with it, but overall I think it's a solid effort. Alright, so wrapping this video up, once again, my name is Lou. If you're new to my channel, welcome. If you're a returning subscriber or viewer, thank you so much for your support. So until the next video, be safe, take care of yourself, buy lots of toys, and most importantly, be happy. And I will see you at the next one. Alright, later.